Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks for joining in. I'm excited to be talking about this topic, which is on how you can choose the most effective data science projects. So I'll just repeat some of these instructions. Overall, 45 minutes. I'll cover this content in 35 minutes. We'll have some polls in between, and we'll plan 10 minutes for the Q&A. And if you have any questions midway, please do type it in, and I'll take them midway or at the end. So I'll get started with a story, a data science story. There was this large financial services organization where the CEO was a big supporter of data science. And he decided to start the organization's analytics journey by which other way than hiring data scientists. And he hired 1,000 of them, each at an average cost of $250,000. And he was pretty proud of this achievement. It's no mean deal to get so many unicorns. But a few months down the line, the organization did not realize the intended benefits from all of these pricey data scientists. And later it was found out that all of these people were not in the strictest sense data scientists. So that's where the disconnect became bigger. Eventually, the initiative was completely shelved, leading to a huge loss of investment and, importantly, time to market. This is not an isolated incident. This happens across many organizations. So much that Gartner says that 80% of analytics projects will fail. That's a pretty staggering number. In this age of AI, where we have so much of interest and investment going into visualization and advanced analytics, this is shocking. But if you take a step back, what do we really mean by AI? That term in itself is fuzzy, just like data scientist. And how is it different from machine learning? I like this distinction. Check this out. So if it's written in Python, it's probably machine learning. If it's written in PowerPoint, it's definitely AI. A beautiful distinction. So you can rest assured that we'll be talking about AI today. Quick introduction, I'm Ganes Kesari, co-founder and head of analytics at Gramner. At Gramner, we tell insights as stories. We help organizations solve business challenges by using analytics and data visualization. We help them begin their journey, apply analytics, and get benefits and connect data to the decisions. We work with 100+ clients globally, and I'm passionate about making data science accessible for everyone and simplifying analytics. I speak and write on this, and I'm currently working on my book, which is on applied data science for executives. Pretty excited about it. I'll be sharing more on this in my social channels. In this webinar, you'll learn 4 things. 1, why do so many projects fail? Number 2, you will learn how to choose the right data science initiatives and build a roadmap out of it, the short-term and the long-term ones. And finally, you'll see a lot of examples from various industries covering visualization, storytelling, analytics, and we'll also see one real-world example of how you can go through this entire process of roadmap building. So let's get started. We'll talk first about the maturity levels with data. Organizations get started by collecting the data. It could be internal, external, from transactions, logs, sensors. They might get it by end of day, end of the hour, or they may even stream it live. And once they get the data, they have to store it. It could be structured, unstructured, data lakes. There are various formats at disposal. And then the raw data has to be transformed. You have to clean it, prepare it, extract, transfer, load, and make sure that the data is in a usable place so that you can then start your reporting initiatives. Identify the metrics, KPI, which capture what happened in the business yesterday. That's the realm of descriptive analysis. You find out backward-looking insights as to what happened, come up with simple aggregates and simple reports. Most organizations have Excel sheets and a lot of tabular reports to achieve this. When organizations aspire to get deeper, they get into exploratory data analysis to ask deeper questions of their data. Not just what happened, but why did it happen? You get into diagnostic analytics. And using machine learning and AI, you start looking into the future. What is likely to happen next week, next month? That's predictive analytics. And ML and AI enable you to get there. And all of these insights are useful only if someone can make use of them. That's where the consumption layer comes into play. So at the most basic level, you might come up with simple narratives, summary bullet points of what your inference from the insight is, and a few points on what the recommendation, the business recommendation has to be. So you come up with as simple as PowerPoint and you create and share it to make it consumable. And you can take this further by using information design, data visualization to concise hundreds of these Excel sheets into one single page. And go even further by using data stories, how you can capture the insights and tell engaging stories, whether it's business or with public or social data, how you can engage your audience to promote actions. A lot of organizations struggle in terms of getting into these levels and going deeper at these levels. The real holy grail of data science is when every single decision within an organization is strongly rooted in data. So that's when data becomes a culture. You have to come up with change management, workflows, and enable people so that they can take actions, data literacy, and a whole lot of aspects come into play here. And these maturity levels fall into different phases, which some of you would be familiar with. Data engineering is the discipline of collecting, storing, and transforming data, where you make sure that you have the single source of truth within your organization. That's very important. And once you have data in place, data science kicks in, reporting and beyond that. And finally, the last stage where every person within the organization uses data, that's what I call as data as culture. Having an organizational data culture is a really good objective, and that's something to aim for. So now, before we get into choosing data science projects, and we'll talk about a variety of these maturity levels and how you can build your roadmap spanning all of this. Before that, I wanted to emphasize what we really mean with these levels. It will be good to look at examples and lots of them. We'll start with that before jumping into the choosing part of projects. First, we'll start with reporting. I'll focus on the data science part for this webinar. Starting with reporting, it's pretty obvious. All of us work with spreadsheets, hundreds of Excel sheets, and organizations have tabular reports, MIS, and a variety of plain tabular reports which people go through. These are good starting points to find and get hold of your data. And the major work after you get your data in place is to spend time on insights and in terms of next steps. So reporting is just an enabler. After that, you have to spend a lot more time for all of these other aspects. So that's where when you apply insights, it can be much more powerful. Let's look at some examples here. We will look at two examples from machine learning and AI. Machine learning, there was this client, a large pharma client, where they had the challenge of several servers, thousands of servers globally spread out, and many of them were failing on and off. So they wanted to find which ones are likely to fail next. Predict failure of servers. That was the problem statement. We took the last 2 months of data for Windows, Unix, and we had parameters such as CPU utilization, physical memory used, capacity, uptime. And we started doing the wrangling part, cleaning and analysis, exploratory analysis to find what kind of patterns exist within the data. And then we moved on to modeling, starting with simple linear regression. And we tried a variety of models. What was really effective was an ensemble of Holt-Winter and Otto-Arima models. This gave us a good accuracy of 80+%. The results were really two columns of data. One is what is likely to be the utilization next week and next month. So with these two data points, the organization was able to understand which ones are likely to get into the risky zone so that they can take appropriate actions. So that is useful and that is forward-looking using machine learning. Second example is where we talk about AI. And here, this is one of our favorite examples using AI to identify salmon in the rivers. The Nisqually River Foundation monitors salmon population and the species to ensure there's an ecological balance. You may be surprised to know that salmon are fast disappearing in many parts of the world. We take them for granted. So this foundation was monitoring and they had sensors and camera traps set up in several parts of the riverbed, the narrow riverbed. As and when fish swim by, the sensors get triggered and cameras start capturing the videos. So for every fish crossing, about 60 seconds of video gets captured. And then it's over to the biologists to look at these videos, binge watch them, and identify the salmon species. Not a very fun task. So that's where AI comes in. We built a deep learning based model to take over and do this identification of species from the video. Firstly, the model extracts the right frame where the fish appears, and then it comes up with an instant detection of the species. Here's a quick example. What you see here is an actual video shot of the camera placed in the riverbed, and you will see the fish crossing now, and we'll see the model in action. So this is a salmon, and the model has identified this as steelhead. It's drawn the bounding box, and you can see that it's impressive that even when a portion of the fish body is visible, the AI model is still able to identify it. The accuracy was good, and the effective result was that what took the researchers 100 hours was cut down to less than 20, about 80% effort saving. Those are insights examples. Let's go on to consumption. What if you can convert numbers into pictures very simply? Can they be a lot more revealing? Here's an example from US birth dates. So we have 15 years of data been around as public data set for years. And if we can convert these into simple visuals, what can we find? So here you have the months and days of the month laid out like a calendar. The darker shaded ones are dates with higher births, and the lighter ones are fewer births. So it clearly emerges that September seems to be the high birth or popular month, which means that most of the conceptions happen during the winter holiday season. And what's also interesting is there were very few births during Christmas, Thanksgiving, and all of the holidays, New Year's Day, Independence. You see those white patches. And parents probably don't like their children born on 13th of any month. And you can see that there is a preference for days like the Valentine's Day. So the data starts sharing a lot of insights when you just simply visualize it. Here's the data for India. How are the patterns different? It's very different. If you look at it, the popular months are May and June. And August onwards, you see an unnatural decline in the births. That really can't be true. Let's further investigate. You see that the 5th, 10th, and 15th, the round numbered dates seem to have a lot of children born there. These are classic indicators of fraud. They show that the dates have been cooked up. We have taken this data from the school admissions. And those familiar with India, you know that parents alter the date of birth. They move it earlier so that the kids can go to school a little earlier without wasting 6 months, 9 months. So that's the kind of optimization that parents usually do, and it shows up here. So that is what a consumption can help you in terms of simple visualizations showing the patterns. So now I will finally emphasize on insights and consumption as the final category of examples. How powerful would it be if we can go deeper into machine learning and AI and also present these as stories? Let's look at a few examples. We worked with the World Bank to answer the question, does access to new technology facilitate innovation? We had data from 150 countries, and it had a lot of parameters like innovation index, access to technology, the entrepreneurship statistics, and so on. So we took up this and we did both the insights and consumption, and what you see here is a story layer available. And initially we have the countries plotted. Now we have this storytelling or scrolling and storytelling, where you start applying the clustering algorithm to find out the similarity between the countries. You can see that some regions are clustered together, and there are others which are split across. And sub-Saharan Africa, Asia, you can see the colored regions and how they are splitting up. And this shows the countries which are favorable for innovation, less favorable, and so on. Now the next insight is what is the relationship between innovation and technology? So there seems to be a strong relationship. almost linear, and you can see some countries standing out there. Europe, Central Asia clearly stands there. And there are a few other countries from Asia, a handful of countries coming in there. Now, the next question we're trying to answer is, what is the relationship between same innovation, x-axis, versus the business and innovation environment? Again, some relation, the patterns are a little different. There are more countries in East Asia coming in. If we go further and look at the relationship between entrepreneurship and innovation, not a strong relationship. That's surprising. And you can see that there are countries where it's inversely related as well. And if you go further and look at entrepreneurship versus perceived opportunities, there is a connect. In countries where there's a higher appetite for entrepreneurship, they perceive that the country offers more opportunities to start a firm. And finally, in this interface, we provide a way for users to explore and find their own stories. Classic case of exploratory analysis, machine learning, clustering, and storytelling combined together. Second example is from workflow management. This is a large pharma company who had thousands of service requests coming in every day from across several countries. They wanted to identify what are the bottlenecks for service requests, where do they get stuck, and what causes it. So the workflow here shows the sequence of movement gets submitted as a draft, and then moving to approval stages, planning, in progress, and completed. The circles indicate the volume. The color indicates the aging. You can find out that in progress is a bucket where a lot of tickets are stuck, and the aging bad, but not as bad as completed, where you have a higher average turnaround time, almost 147 days. It's worse when you look at the tickets moving backward, the downward flow. From completed, a lot of tickets are moving back to submitted. That is causing a huge turnaround time. So if we investigate further to find out what causes this delay, that's where we bring in machine learning into play. We have used group means, an algorithm that identifies what causes these delays. Is it the customer? Is it the entity, organization? We start finding out, and then there are automated narratives. The text that you see here is machine generated, which comes up and summarizes the insights. And overall, for any user coming in from a country or a particular department, they can filter, and all of these insights and consumption aspects, the visuals, can get updated there. So that can be powerful, and that's an example of how you can effectively combine deep insights with deep consumption storytelling. So coming back to the maturity levels, we've looked at several examples of how you can scale and what are the benefits you get when you go to the higher levels. Now let's dive into the second portion. Before that, I wanted to run a quick poll on what are the data science maturity levels in your organization. Have you seen this? So now let me initiate this poll, and you should see this on your screen. If you can answer this, I'll read it out. What is the level of data maturity in your organization? Is it data engineering, the first three levels? Are you into reporting, insights, consumption? And are you in the stage of decisions where data has become a culture? I see some responses coming in. I'll give it a few more seconds. And another reminder, in case you have any questions, please feel free to type it in. And the next time we pause for questions for the polls, I can take some of those while you answer. I see most of you have voted. Let's give it a couple of more seconds. All right, so let me close the poll. You should be able to see the results here. So you have, let me read it out and then I'll close it. So most of you have data engineering in place. 67% have data engineering in place. Half of you, 50%, have reporting layer in place. 58% have insights. That's interesting. A lot of you are in the higher stages. 17% have consumption, where you probably are presenting these as simple narratives. You're trying to scale into visualization storytelling. And what's also interesting is 17% of you have data as a culture. So okay, probably the poll results aren't coming here. So, I'll share it after the session. So 17% have mentioned that data has become a culture in your organization. So moving back to the presentation, We'll get into the second part where we'll answer 3 questions: why projects fail, how to identify the initiatives and use that to build your data roadmap. Firstly, we saw that 80% of projects fail. What is the key reason? The biggest challenge is with prioritization. Imagine this scenario. You come across a cool AI algorithm and you have capability data scientists in your organization. So the natural tendency is to pick that algorithm and see where can you apply it within your organization. So you you go after the interesting aspect of things as opposed to looking at what is impactful for the business. So when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So that is a challenge, and eventually it can come back in terms of lower business benefits. The second challenge is where people go after what is urgent. Where are the projects, which projects are people screaming for attention, as opposed to looking at what is strategically aligned to the organizational objective. Third category is where you go after what is possible, that you have this data to run a pilot or to do a phase 1, or you have budget for doing, say, for the next 3 months. You go and you launch that. You don't look at the feasibility aspects of productionizing it. Will it really scale? When you don't consider those aspects, the projects get halted midway, or they die a slow death. So these 3 are the fundamental challenges why projects get it wrong and where organizations miss the priorities. So I equate the data science journey to a 30-hour marathon hike. So you can optimize all of your gear and choose the best route. But if you pick your target wrong, all of this effort will go in vain. So in summary, insights don't deliver business benefits whenever they solve the wrong problem. So how do you ensure that you identify the right problems and rally support behind that? That's what we will talk about now. And before that, I will run the second poll on data science adoption challenges. So assuming you have, say, reporting or the next level POCs, visualization or machine learning or AI pilots, I think a lot of you are into insights stage. What are the challenges that you see in your organization which are holding back adoption? Is it the lack of data? Is it the lack of people, skilled people? We hear a lot about that. Is it the difficulty identifying appropriate use cases? Or is it something to do with the company culture where people don't see a need for it really? Or is it something to do with the technical challenges or something else? I see some responses coming in. I'll give it 10 more seconds. About 60% of the responses. Okay, so here's the result. It's equally split between difficulty identifying appropriate business use cases and lack of skilled people. Appropriate business cases seems to have won now. So understandably, most of you are in this webinar to find out how do you identify and build a roadmap. So that seems to be a major pain area for this audience. Second is availability of skilled people. And third is lack of data. What's interesting is the last 2 options I had given, not many of you or none of you have chosen. A similar poll was run by O'Reilly, and they found that the biggest hurdle, and by the way, this was amongst a few thousand executives who were in early stages of the data science productionization or POC. So they had some analytics initiatives in place. And the biggest challenge reported by this audience was the company culture. They say that audience within the organization don't recognize the needs. There is a lot of resistance internally. And then followed by data, skilled people, and difficulty identifying business use cases. So when you have company culture as the biggest roadblock, that can be dangerous. So as Peter Drucker said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So you can have the best of plans, but if you don't have culture by your side, it can be difficult. So that's where you need to bring in the executive firepower. You need to get an executive mandate when you start the data science journey. And you should go to them not just for their budget, but for their time as well. And why do we need that time? Number one, we have to start the data science initiatives top down. Start by asking the questions, get them into a huddle, identify your core team, the champions, and get all of them into a 2 to 4 hour huddle. But that could be a challenge. That could be your first project in most organizations, getting all of those people into a 4-hour discussion. But that is essential. You need to do that to make sure that this aligns with the strategic priorities, you get the funding, and you are able to hit all the right areas. You will need executive support throughout, but very specifically, you will need it at a second phase. That's when you are rolling out your initiatives. You need the executive power to navigate change. Data science changes the way people work. So it's a massive change management exercise that is needed to make sure that people actually use your visualization or machine learning dashboards. So that's where change management is needed by planning roadshows. You set up reviews, starting with the executives and cascade it down the organization. And you build an incentives to make sure and motivate people to come up and participate in that. So the summary is that the success of data science journey is proportional to the level of executive attendance in a kickoff workshop. We have seen that that's a very good indicator. When in organizations the executives say that, yes, I've enabled the next level, you go and execute it, that already is a problem signal. I talked about an example roadmap. So we'll build it and I'll keep painting the picture along the way. So this is from a media broadcaster we work with, one of the largest media broadcasters in the world. And in this case, we had this initiative started at the sales function. The head of sales and the executives were firmly, they had bought into this idea. And they brought the leadership within the next level leadership, and all of them got together to decide the priorities, choose and give the inputs to the champion and the core team. And they also very firmly put their weight behind the initiative when it went live. So it was heartening to see the entire sales organization coming together, and whether it is before training, road shows which were done in every single major city the client had presence in. So every person in the sales function was brought in to the training, and there were specific incentives lined up to make sure that people who use it get rewarded and build a behavioral change. So that was very successful, and that is very important. That, I would say, is the first step, even before you start identifying your use cases. The next step, once you have the team and the discussion in place, is to identify the users. And we'll have to ask the question, who are the audience we need to serve first? You can't build a solution for everyone. If you build it for everyone, no one will use it. So identify your target audience, who are the primary users, and define them. It's useful to come up with the roles, designations, and kind of paint a persona. Look at their priorities. What are the goals? What are the goals that they're trying to hit in the short run, long run? Do interviews, focus group discussions with them, find out and hear from the horse mouth in terms of what they want to achieve. And finally, find out what are their pain areas. What are the challenges that keep them up at night? Try to quantify these and identify the metrics. Come up with a ranking of the challenges. When you ask for the pain areas, you'll come up with a laundry list, but you need to rank them in terms of most important to least important. We'll see what we have to do once we have these areas, because once you come up with the pain areas, you can start looking at the initiatives and data-driven initiatives that will help you address that. So here's a framework to go about all of this. We take a business-driven approach first, start with the stakeholders, identify the users, look at their objectives, and find out what initiatives can be met for those objectives. And then find out what questions have to be answered and what data is needed for that. So far, we're going with a business-driven approach without looking at the data. You should do a reverse flow by starting with the data and finding out independently, if you have spreadsheets of data or certain columns of data, what questions can you answer with that? What initiatives does it address? What objectives will that meet? And which users does it serve? So now both of these may not strictly align. You will have a lot of business objectives where you don't have data. Make a note of it. Those are your future data engineering projects. And on the other side, you'll have a lot of interesting stuff coming from the data, but it may not meet the most important objectives, or it will not be relevant for this audience. Either deprioritize or drop that. So once you map both of these and come up with an alignment. You have your list of relevant data science initiatives. So that's what we will use for the next stage, and we'll talk about prioritizing and building a roadmap. So here in our example with a media broadcaster, we went through this process. The users identified by the ground level sales force. The executives came together and said, the ground level team are our most important users. We need to enable them. The secondary set are the sales managers who work and who manage their performance. The biggest priorities for these people are to acquire and retain clients, understandably, and they need to be able to cross-sell, and they should utilize the ad inventories. So for those not familiar with broadcasters, you have these TV shows and you have the fixed ad slots. So if you don't use it, it is perishable. And if you waste ad inventory, that is wasted revenue opportunity. So that is a priority. The pain areas for these people, through interviews and a lot of discussions over weeks, it was found out that the loss of market share, they were losing clients and there were competitors snagging their clients. And the client monetization, existing clients, the average revenue per client had to be improved. And the ad inventory some of it was getting wasted in certain slots and certain shows. They had to find people who can buy those slots and advertise in those shows. So now, having identified this laundry list of initiatives, we have come to the stage of prioritizing them into a roadmap. There are 3 levers you should use for prioritization. Number 1 is identify the impact. Is it in terms of revenue? Does it increase or does it add to the top line? Does it reduce or save your cost? Does it save the effort? Identify what is the impact of initiatives. Could be a combination of these or one of these. And it is very important to quantify the impact. Come up with a dollar value. What is the impact? If you're talking about effort, and even if you're saying few hours of effort, come up with the average cost for that skill set and come up with a quantified impact. That's important to prioritize, and you will find out that it is important in the later stages as well. Number 2 is feasibility. Look at data feasibility, whether you have all of the data now and for productionizing it, whether you have the technology available in terms of connection with other tools, APIs, and distribution and all of that. And make sure you have the budget, not just for this phase, but future as well. Based on all of these feasibility aspects, come up with low, medium, and high. And finally, the third lever is urgency. Look at the time frame available. When you ask how soon you need something, the common answer is I need it as of yesterday. But not every problem can be solved immediately. So you need to ask them to prioritize it. Is it something which has been hurting for a while, which is impacting revenue, cost, or effort? Is it something which is an inconvenience which needs to be looked at next? Or is it a need felt today, in which case it becomes a pain a few months later? So you have to prioritize them. Once you have these 3 levers, once you understand them, here's how you will pass the list of initiatives into this. We plot impact on the x-axis, feasibility on the y-axis, and we have the urgency, low, medium, high as a color. We come up with neat quadrants. High on impact, high on feasibility is a quick win. Those are the ones you should start right away. Those on high on impact, moderate on feasibility are strategic ones, where you should look at it, take care of the feasibility and start that next. Those that fall into the evaluate zone, use urgency and find out if you can prioritize based on that. High on urgency in the evaluate stage, maybe you should take up, and everything else can be deferred. With this, you come up with your prioritized custom roadmap. You'll be able to identify not just the data science projects, but even the data engineering ones. And for data to become a culture, you need to start early. Come up with some of those future initiatives as well. You build a roadmap spanning all of this. So that's why we call it as a data roadmap, and this neatly feeds into each other. For our example, with a media broadcaster, we looked at 3 key challenges: loss of market share, poor client monetization, wasted ad inventory. To address these challenges, we came up with certain initiatives. For loss of market share, it was customer acquisition and retention. And for client monetization, we looked at cross-selling and improving the pricing so that the average revenue per client can go up. And for ad inventory, the fulfillment rates had to go up. And also the other related initiatives to sell it to new or existing clients, come up with initiatives such as recommendation, find out the most suitable client. So there are several initiatives. We are not talking machine learning, AI, or any of those technical terminology yet. We're just talking about the initiatives. The techniques will come in later. So we identified the impact, urgency, and feasibility. We looked at the metrics here, and for each of it, we found out what is the dollar value, the urgency, and feasibility. With this, we were able to plot it and slot it into the quadrant we had looked at. So, final poll before we wrap up. What are the challenges you see in your organization to build the data science roadmap? We've looked at the steps. So now, if I were to ask you, of the steps we've talked about, what do you think is a challenge? Is it the access to executives, availability of the end users? Is it understanding of the users' goals and challenges? Even if you have the people available, you may not be able to find out exactly. Or it could be a skill in identifying the business use cases, coming up with the requirements discussion, talking to these people, and navigating this entire system. Or it could be prioritization of initiatives. After you find all of this, people come up with 20 items. I have a challenge in slotting and identifying what is most important. All of these are natural in our consulting engagements. We have come across a variety of these challenges. Would be useful to see what you think about it. I see some responses coming in. Give it 10 more seconds. The user's goals and challenges seems to be an issue. Okay, so here are the results. Understanding of users and users' goals and challenges is the biggest issue. Even if you have access to the users, no one has mentioned that availability of users is a challenge, but just understanding their goals. I completely agree with you. That is something, a subtle aspect. How do you understand and get the details from them? The second is skills in identifying the relevant business use cases and prioritization of initiatives. The last one is access to executives. So that's encouraging. If you have good access, a lot of the other things we spoke about can be addressed. So now it's time to wrap up. We talked about 4 key learnings today. First, we started with the maturity levels in data. We looked at how you can move across the stages. We looked at a lot of examples, and we emphasized on insights plus consumption. That's an area of focus that Gramner has. How do you come up with the right insights and make it consumable? We also looked at why projects fail. The 80% failure rate was explained in terms of the priorities. We looked at the way to go ahead and identify the initiatives, starting initiatives top down. We talked about bringing executives in and then understanding the users. And finally, we looked at building the roadmap. How do you use the 3 levers to sequence and come up with a prioritized roadmap? I'll leave you with this. Organizations that have reached higher levels of data maturity, it was found that they are able to significantly exceed the business goals. So data science can be a powerful lever to give you that extra business value and also come up with a strategic differentiation for your organization. It can transform the organization and make you more competitive. Hope you found this useful. Thanks for all of your participation. Great to know about the challenges you're facing and how you're planning to address that. With that, thank you. I'll close the session, and if you have any questions, I can take that now. And by the way, while you type in your questions, here under gramner.com/solutions, this URL, you'll be able to find a lot of examples. All of those I shared today are public examples you can find here. There are several more examples. And if you have any other questions or follow on, or you would like to discuss more, do hit me up on these on LinkedIn, Twitter. I'm fairly active. So let me switch over and look at the questions. Wait a few seconds for questions. Don't have any yet. So if you have any questions in these stages we talked about, specifically How do you run these workshops? That is a question we get asked often. In terms of structuring them, how soon should you plan? Is there a checklist for it? So that could be one area. And second could be on how to run those requirements discussions with the users, which is a much more involved discussion. How do you plan the interviews? How do you collect the right inputs? That could be a area of concern. And also, a lot of people have come up with conflicting priorities. When people ask for certain initiatives, and there are other teams which talk about completely different initiatives, and they find it difficult to prioritize and balance the needs within an organization. So I have one question here: how to sense a data science opportunity? Okay, so that's a good one. The best way would be to start with the business challenges. If you have a business problem, most likely you have a solution based on data. So you can, the maturity levels we had seen, it could be in terms of coming up with visualization to make the insights obvious and connect the decisions to the data. Or it could be a forward-looking insight to find out what is likely to happen using ML, AI, and plug it. So any area you have a business challenge, you can sense that there is a likely data science opportunity. The technique and the mode will come in later. The second question is, if we, how do we define if a problem use case requires a model or a dashboard? So the choice between machine learning and data visualization. So if you look at insights versus consumption, if you want to find out what is the pattern, why is something happening, that's where you get into analysis. And there, a lot of people come back and ask that, do I need to run a particular machine learning technique? The strong advice we always give is start with the simplest form of analysis. Start with statistics, or start with even simple exploratory analysis within Excel. That will tell you what are the patterns lying in there and whether you need the stronger techniques in machine learning. And if that still doesn't address, move on to AI. So that is almost like a ladder that you can follow for insights identification. And anytime you have any insight, even if it is a simple bullet point, it is always powerful to visualize them. It could be as simple charts or as a dashboard. So once you have an insight, see what are the best ways to storytell or visualize them. The next question is how to draw a roadmap in a company that doesn't have a data science team at all. This person is working in a software development company. So, a common question. So thanks for asking that. So you do not need a formal data science team in place. A lot of organizations we have seen, they get started with business analysts. And there's a future webinar we are planning on the data science roles and teams. So that way your question neatly ties into the next webinar we are planning, which is on how to build a team and what kind of skills you need on the team. So for your question, we do not need a team of data scientists to start. All you need is business analysis and an understanding of flair for data. With that, you ask the right questions, you come up and use tools which you are familiar with. Could be Excel, or could be any of the other exploratory visualization tools, or could be any of the exploratory analysis tools. That is sufficient, and a lot of courses and a lot of training is available out there. And most of these tools are also have a UI and a visual driven. It makes it easy to apply and use them. So start with the business analysis, and your BAs or consultants are the best bet to begin your journey. And once you mature that with the generalists, then you can start bringing in the specialists, whether it is data scientists, designers, or other machine learning experts can come in after that. I think that's it. We also are on time. So I'll take one final question. What are your learnings since Gramner's inception in the field of visualization, data insights, and ML and AI? How is the industry requirement changing, and what should be our adoption strategy? So the biggest learning, having run hundreds of data science engagements, is that the questions you ask of the data determines the final fate of the project. So that's where we talked about bringing in the executives, coming up with the right objectives. So asking right questions of data and taking up the right problems is the key thing. We spend a bulk of our projects, a lot of time is spent in those upfront stages. So there are clients who approach us and say that we want to solve this problem, build a machine learning model. Can you start next week? We say that no, we need to spend time talking to your team, understanding them, understanding the data sources, and we need to do a landscape study to get on to the next steps. So that is most useful, and that is where we have seen the biggest learnings come from. And the final one was on adoption strategy. So that is a detailed discussion in itself in terms of why do projects not get adopted. We talked very briefly about change management. There are other aspects in terms of how you can make sure that users come in to the tool and they get benefit from the tool. I'll share some references after this webinar. There are some articles and some useful references. I'll share that. And we are planning a webinar after we talk about the teams. That would be the next one where we'll talk about the adoption strategy. So with that, I will close the session. Thanks for joining. Thanks for your participation. Thank you.